Our members are our lifeblood in the party. And when it's election year, we just have to be out campaigning as much as we can. And campaigning comes in all forms, on the doors, on the phones, delivering leaflets, sharing social media. We can all get involved in the election campaign. That's the thing.
Hello and welcome to the We Are Labour podcast. I am Dan Greef, your host, and this is the show that highlights our amazing Labour candidates and the constituencies we need to win to form the next Labour government. As you hear the stories and experiences from our candidates, I want you to think, how can you help? What can you do to make the difference? Can you go and leaflet, knock on doors, donate money, or phone canvass voters? By giving a little of your time and or money, it will make a massive difference. This election will be won by Labour members doing our bit to help get the Labour message of hope out to our communities. Let's crack on with the show. Hello, you. Sorry for being a bit late today. If you're listening to this on the day the podcast comes out, normally you will know that actually I record this and then I upload it like, 2 in the morning or whatever. I'm not expecting that you'd be waiting for an episode of this podcast to come out at 2 in the morning. That would be crazy. But anyway, that's when I normally record them, put them up, so they're well done in advance. Now it's 7:30 on Friday and I hadn't even put the podcast together. So by the time you get this, it'll probably be Saturday. But anyway, I've had a great time. I've been in Peterborough the last 2 days doing a massive amount of leafleting because, of course, the spending deadline meant we had to get them out before midnight on Thursday yesterday. And so we had to get those all out, which successfully we did. Huge operation. And it's just wonderful to be part of that Peterborough team because Ryan, the organizer, is brilliant. He's kind of pulling it all together. We've got some wonderful volunteers who are folding the leaflets, going out canvassing. It's just, okay, all I want to say is if you haven't been part of this campaign yet, get involved because not only is it a good cause, not only are you making a difference by helping the party to win, to get our candidates to become the next generation of MPs to take the country forward in a Keir Starmer-led Labour government, but also it's a social thing. You know, you're with like-minded people, getting involved in the campaign centre, having a laugh, making teas for people, getting out on the doorsteps, meeting the public. It's a really, really fun experience. I cannot say how much fun a campaign is. So, yeah, I've been in Peterborough the last 2 days. I've also been with our fantastic candidate, Mariana, here in near to mid-Cambridgeshire, doing our campaign launch. There's also Saturday campaign launches happening in Peterborough and all over the country, as, of course, the campaigns are really kicking in now. Now is the time, guys. Now is the time to step up. And in today's podcast with Rachel Hopkins, who was an MP when I recorded it, she's not now. In fact, we recorded this, I think we got up to about an hour or two, or maybe even half an hour before Sunak's speech announcing the general election when we recorded. So we're actually talking about will he, won't he at the time. So it does kind of seem a bit dated for that reason already. But anyway, when I was talking to her, she talks about how activists are the lifeblood of the party. And I cannot agree enough. It's so, so true. And what have we seen in the first week or so of this campaign, or almost 2 now, of this campaign? We've seen bizarre, crazy policies thrown around by Rishi Sunak. So, pensioners are due to get a massive, is it 2.4 billion a year tax break? Massive amount of money just coming out of completely nowhere. Can you imagine if Labour was just making up policy on the hoof like this? We'd be rightly criticised by the press, and yet Sunak can mention things like huge tax cuts. And I don't know how he's going to fund this. It doesn't seem to be very clear at all. National service, not actually thought through, by the way. What happens, for instance, if you don't do national service? Do you get arrested? What happens if you go and then you desert and you leave? What happens then? How is it going to be paid for? Because this is going to have a huge number of young people in military services who have to, that costs money, of course, to house them, to feed them, to have them somewhere to live. Do they get paid when they're in national service? I don't know these details. But again, just picking policies out of the hat. It's going to be interesting to see that the policies by the Tories don't seem credible. And this is, I think, really interesting. The Labour Party, to me, looks serious. It looks stable. It looks like we're almost the government trying to say steady as you go. We're going to be the people responsible and making sure that every single T is crossed and I is dotted. The Tories, on the other hand, are almost like a populist party on the outside, throwing weird policies at the wall to see what sticks and just hoping that people notice them. Yet they are the ones who have been in charge for 14 years. I find that bizarre. So let's just go through quickly Labour's first steps, and hopefully the manifestos will be here very, very soon. They will be here very soon, what I'm talking about, so you can actually learn those. But in the meantime, let's reflect on the steps so that you know this on the doorstep. Number one, deliver economic stability. That is essential to so much in our country to make sure our country works well, that it's equal, it's a fair place, the economy has to be stable. None of these crazy Tory crashes and shocks we've had in the last few years. Number two, cut NHS waiting times. There's lots of details coming out about that as well. And we did actually hear Wes Streeton talking more about the details behind it. But that's the key thing you need to know at the moment is cut NHS waiting times. Number three, launch a new border security command. No more gimmicks. Instead, let's actually have a policy on this issue that actually works. Number four, set up Great British Energy. Essential policy that for our security with energy, but also the cleanliness of our environment in the future. Number five, crack down on antisocial behaviour. That will make your life much better if you're suffering from that right now, and particular protection for women as well. And number six, recruit 6,500 new teachers. So let's go through those really quickly. Deliver this economic stability, cut NHS waiting times, launch a new border security command, set up Great British Energy, cracked on antisocial behaviour, recruit 6,500 new teachers. I hope that helps you on the doorstep as you're going out in the next few days. Just a quick reminder, I sent to Joe Fortune as well as Andrew Pakes and also Peter Kyle today in Peterborough and telling them about this amazing playlist. So if you don't know, Doorstep Win 24 is actually the playlist on Spotify that I've put together of all of my guest song choices, which then you as activists can listen to as you're going out and about on your daily deliveries or weekly deliveries, how often you want to do it. It's up to you. So go check that out. It's on Spotify. And I'm now going to hand over to the fantastic, the fabulous Rachel Hopkins. I hope you enjoy this, and hopefully she'll be once again re-elected as MP for Luton South. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. I am now really pleased to say that the Luton South MP, Rachel Hopkins, is with me now. Welcome to We Are Labour, Rachel.
Hello, nice to be here.
Great to have you on. And of course, the day we're recording, we don't know what the news is going to be. It's 22nd of May. There's big speculation. When they're listening to this, members might be listening going, oh, that was nothing. That was like 2 weeks ago now or a week ago. Nothing happened. Or today could be some big news, right? What's been going on in Parliament today? Or in the speculation, should we say, about Parliament?
Well, yeah, there's been speculation that at the press conference at 5 o'clock, following the special cabinet meeting, that the Prime Minister will call a general election. But who knows? Because rumours are running around that it is true. Rumours are running around that it isn't true. But the most important thing, and I think that's what we'll agree on, is we'll be ready anyway, one way or the other.
Yeah. Actually, that's one thing I've noticed this year has been, I think since conference actually, has been really sharpening up this kind of ready focus for the election, because we all knew it was coming. If it is July, bring it on. If it's in November, bring it on. January would be awful, but bring it on as well. But I do notice the party's on such an election footing right now. And that, you know, and I think I just want to get this across to members. If you want to get involved and actually really make a difference to help win this thing, now's the time to do it. Like this weekend, whenever you can, get those leaflets out, knock on doors, whatever you could do to help, right?
100%. I've been in the party, well, I was born into the Labour family, so I've been in the party all my life, but I joined on my 15th birthday. And, you know, sometimes when I was younger, I was a bit normal, didn't always, you know, go to every single branch meeting every single month, you know. But the most important thing is that we reflect the ordinary people we want to represent. And that's why being out and about, chatting to people, whether it's informally at community events or you're down your supermarket, or when we go out on organised campaign sessions, door knocking, to listen to voters' views, find out what they're thinking, and to show them that we're a party that are taking what the public thinks seriously. We've got answers to show that we can actually step up and govern the country. And therefore, when the election comes, whether they announce it today or they announce it in 3 months' time, we'll be ready and we'll be worth voting for. And that's been the case all my life, quite frankly. You know, I've knocked on doors. I realised, I worked out, I was around in 1979 for Thatcher, but I was only about 7. But I first knocked on doors for Neil Kinnock in sort of '87 properly as a teenager, and I've knocked on doors under every single leader of the Labour Party because we are a party, and that's the most important thing. And we're also a family, and we'll have our arguments about what we believe in and what we agree this and we don't agree that, and we'll have a different take. That's democracy, and it's really important. But unless we're listening to voters and ensuring we can show them that we're ready to sort of, step up, be elected, form a government, then, who cares what people's views are really. So I'm always out and about on the doorsteps. I always get told off for talking too much and having too much fun when we go out door knocking. So
it is fun though, right? I mean, I find
I'll
the
be
same.
up your street sometime soon.
Yeah, I totally agree. I find it is fun because, I said to somebody actually here today at work how people talk on behalf of, they say X, Y, Z, and everyone on my street thinks that. And then you go to the next house, they think the complete opposite. And I think actually listening to people and their concerns, you do get a really good feel for what's going on, what the worries are. And sometimes they're completely not what you think. And I think our electoral system can be questioned sometimes, but the thing I like is that you have a real sense of accountability for one MP to their area, and they're there to listen to them. Well, in theory, I'm sure there's some MPs who don't, and other parties, I'm sure, but they are generally there to listen and have that connection to them. And I think that is so important. I mean, you must hear stories all the time, right, that come up that you sort of pick up on your canvassing sessions?
Yeah, that's why we do it. It's all well and good me coming into Parliament and standing up to champion something or to oppose something. But if I'm not connecting with my constituents and my voters, then, is it a representative view? There are some constants, in Luton, we struggle. People always tell me about the poor parking, always by their neighbours, and their neighbours say it's by their neighbours, just, parking, those local issues. But if you can try and work with your local councillors to try and do something about it, then people recognise that we as politicians have listened and are doing something about it. But on some of the big stuff, people are absolutely worried about crime. The fact that you haven't got a named police officer like we used to have under a good neighbourhood policing model. They're really worried about the lack of support for SEND kids in school, the fact that budgets have been cut so much we can't afford the staff in schools to support them. And they tell us those stories. And when you have that lived experience, when you've really listened to the concerns of someone, you take it with you when you make those contributions in Parliament. And for me, that is so vital. It's another reason why going out on the doorsteps, listening to people, and then thinking about how you can take that in and try and change things, difficult as it is in opposition, it's really important.
So about that point then, I mean, as an opposition MP, I imagine, well, Dan Zeichner, when he came on, was saying how he imagines that his predecessor, who was a Lib Dem in the coalition, would have had a very different experience as an MP for Cambridge because he was in the governing side of the House. And so it must be quite a hard experience sometimes being an opposition MP where, you're always trying to get the government to make change. Is that something that's going to be, do you think, radically different when hopefully Labour does win the next election?
Look, the whole point of the Labour Party is to win power and to make changes for, ordinary working people, let's be frank. So when you're not in power, you have to either chip away at the edges, and occasionally we get something through because we've managed to persuade the government. But more often than not, you're just trying to chip away at the lack of impact of their own position, their own arguments. You try and, have a bit of a go. You try and reflect the views of your constituents. But ultimately, they've got, it's a diminished 80-seat majority. I'm not quite sure what it is at the moment. But that means even though we make the best arguments, even though we've made the best speeches, hitting the nail on the head, the fact that their majority will just walk through the lobbies and push through the government's legislation makes it really difficult. So that's why opposition is never a great place to be.
Yeah, and hopefully we will in the next election. You can actually then have a word with the person who's got the portfolio to make a difference, right? And that's,
exactly that. I mean, some of the stuff does get done here when you do influence people in the governing party, in the Conservatives, but it's sort of rare and it's on those little side issues. But until you're in power, that's when you'll have that ability to influence, that ability to say, can we shape policy this way? It's really going to work well in my constituency. And, that's what we're all going to try and work to. And that's why we're not complacent when it comes to the general election, because absolutely we need a Labour government to be able to do some of those things we want to do.
See, that's the other thing I was going to say. As an MP at the moment, it must be kind of dead time almost in Parliament because there's going to be nothing major, I guess, being announced by the government now because they just haven't got the time, have they? I mean, depending on this announcement anyway. But even if the election's in November, is there much that Parliament could get through if it is announced from first from the first paper or whatever. What do you call the first paper again? I forget its name. Is it Green Paper?
Yeah, the whole legislative process. It is, yeah, it is quite difficult. I'm in the middle of actually a piece of legislation that actually both parties want to get through. It's the football governance bill.
Right.
We're in committee, line by line scrutiny, and so gosh, it'd be pretty devastating if the election is called and we don't get it through. It has to be in the Lords, at least in the Lords, even if it's not being scrutinised, to be able to possibly get through under sort of the wash-up arrangements at the end of a Parliament. So I'm hoping that on that basis, it's not on a general election, because I really want this to get through, because it's been a lot of work actually cross-party supporting football fans and the governance of football and the sustainability of football clubs, that we've actually come to a point of agreement. There's some disagreement over some of the details, and that's why we're pushing a few things to a vote. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, if I'm really honest, it's sort of mid-afternoon. I know there's this announcement coming later, but business has finished for the afternoon. We've had too many afternoons where business is finishing a bit early because there's
Right.
not that much coming through, as you said.
Because I mean, that's the thing. You think about Parliament having late night sittings and voting like through the lobbies to the early hours of the morning and all that sort of thing. That hasn't happened for a long time. And actually, a
No.
Labour government would have to do that again just to start things moving. I mean, I don't want to be too geeky and too like technical here, but a Labour government coming in must have a huge amount of things to get through. And then you've got primary and secondary, all this sort of legislation stuff. How on earth do you manage that and prioritise it? Sorry if I'm getting a bit too geeky here on it, but I think it's going to be fascinating to think how we get this stuff going quickly.
Um, yes, there's a lot that, well, the whips manage what business is coming through with the business managers from both parties, and they'll have those discussions. So trying to, get stuff through, absolutely. Since, weirdly, I got elected in 2019, and then we had COVID. So my first 2 years of experiencing how this place works were very different
Yeah, I can
to
imagine.
how it actually works. So then
Yeah,
we all had to sort of relearn it in sort of um, autumn 2021 of how stuff happens. If we're hearing a lot around the preparations potentially for government should we get elected, we will work really hard to make sure we do, and that first 100 days program, and that will mean legislation having to be drafted or prepared even now to be ready to get into the whole process of being able to be the first sort of papers put in, the second reading, when it's the outline stuff is discussed, committees. There's a whole lot of stuff that needs to go through to sort of manage it effectively, if that makes sense.
yeah.
Um, yeah, thankfully we do have people whose job that is to make sure that all happens.
That's good because I just kind of feel like in '97, I think even Gordon Brown and Blair would probably admit there was probably lost time in that first 2 years where they were so cautiously trying to maintain some of the economic policies of Kenneth Clarke and the Conservatives that actually by kind of 1999 they're then hitting their like program agenda, but it was quite late in really, wasn't it? And I just don't feel like we've got the grace to do that. If we win, and of course I don't want to underestimate how big a challenge that is to win, but if we win, we have to hit the ground running, don't we? And kind of by week 1 or 2 in Parliament, you would expect to see things rolling because otherwise we don't know how long we're going to be there. If we do win anyway, we could be out within 5 years. We have to be so, I think, on it right now because the country's in such a mess, isn't it? It's like there's so many things that have gone wrong. And I can't think of, it sounds a bit awful to say, really, I can't think of anything positive in the last 14 years. So apart from just repairing things, Labour has to be quick with its agenda to get it onto the table.
Yeah, and that first 100 days, and all the mission leads in the shadow cabinet have got their programs. Just last week the announcement of the 6 steps as the first steps towards delivering on the missions, which were, you said it. We've had 14 years of abject failure from the Conservatives, so it's gonna take more than one term to really get back to where we want society, our country to be. And some of that we're going to have to do some initial first steps. I know it's quite obvious with some of the things we want to do, stabilising the economy, tackling the NHS waiting list. I mean, I speak to people both in town and in country about their desire to be able to get, whether it's a GP appointment, whether it's actually not having to wait for, often quite standard surgery or whatever. So
Yeah.
there's so much that will need to come in, that preparing now having some of that draft legislation and actually setting out how we're going to do it. That's the most important thing as well. Whether it's, the 6,500 teachers, we know that we're going to be able to tackle that with the non-dom status, etc., etc. So there's some of these things, but even making sure that we can change the tax rules to make sure that that funding can be released, all of that is going to have to be programmed. And, preparing for government does kick in. There is an agreement between, the government and Her Majesty's official opposition, His Majesty's official opposition, that there is access talks, they sort of call them, so that you can actually get and talk to some of the civil servants in the departments to really understand, sort of what's under the bonnet sort of stuff, to then help shape your future programme. But you still don't get to see everything. It's the beginnings. And then going in, it could be worse than some people might think.
It's crazy our politics. When you say that, you're so right. I mean, I run a very, very small business, and if I suddenly said I'm going to hand this over to somebody else, and just something I've grown from my kitchen table, by the way, like making chocolate, it was like a small little side project which I now have got a staff and a team. But if I suddenly stepped outside of this tiny business, somebody would step in going, what on earth am I doing here? You'd have to properly hand it over, wouldn't you? This is running the whole country. I mean, this is such a different scale. And yet we also have a system where you have to make pledges and promises and manifestos, but you don't actually know exactly what you're dealing with sometimes, do you? Which I find that it's really weird system when you think about it. Because if you were managing the transfer of a business ownership, you'd be so on it, wouldn't you? And yet in this country, I think we have to have those conversations. I mean, are they happening now, by the way? Is Keir Starmer and his team, are they doing those?
I believe Access Talks started in sort of the New Year sort of time.
Oh, that's good.
But the detail behind who's saying what, don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so in that case, let's go on to the missions. And also, I'd like to talk about those steps that were announced recently as well. So what actual difference would that make to not just the country, but also to your neck of the woods in Luton? How would that change people's lives for the better?
Oh, look, whenever I go out talking to people on the doorstep, it's whether they're whether they're worried about stuff in their schools. So we know we need access to teachers. Whether it's concerns around antisocial behaviour, where we've spoken about, we want to have a better neighbourhood policing structure, bringing back more PCs and PCSOs, youth hubs and mental health hubs. I talk to so many parents who are really worried about their kids growing up. They've had 14 years of Tories plus the impact of COVID. So those things coming through, but some of them we can deliver fairly quickly, but others will take time. And that's why, underpinning so much of it as well, actually, is settling the economy. People have really struggled and are still struggling with the cost of living. So whether it's, I was really pleased with Ed Miliband's announcements around GB Energy, publicly owned clean energy provider that will both, bring bills down, but also be better for the environment. I mean, that is such a great policy to get behind, particularly for so many of our young people who want to talk about the environment maybe more than my generation did. It's something that actually resonates with different age groups as much as is a really good policy to push forward. So the missions are setting out that framework because it's going to be that long-term plan. And then we're going to have those first steps that have been announced, which is something we can actually go out and talk about on the doorstep, that they're costed, they're ready to go. When we hopefully get elected, we can actually step this forward. This is how we would do it. Because so often, you'd have had it as well, people say, well, how will you do that? What's behind it? How are you going to pay for it? Well, you know what? This is our first steps. This is our down payment, so to speak. And then, as part of that longer term framework under the missions.
Yeah. Love that. I just want to say, though, I find it really interesting how, it's obviously a good thing that these are costed. And it's a really good thing. I know that Starmer is so cautious the way that he delivers things to make sure that everything is worked. Well, all the what you call it, T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, etc. But I find it interesting in comparison. The other side, we've had oven ready deal. What does that even mean? Or you've got to grow the pie by making a bigger pie and splitting it into more pieces. It just seems incredible that the Tories can come out with these weird little memes almost. They're not even announcements, and yet we are so cautious in comparison. And even then, we still got questioned as to, but are you sure about this one? Because what about this? And it's incredible the different scrutiny that parties get, isn't it? I've been noticing that. We have to be even more cautious than the Tories do. And the Tories, on the other hand, can come out with slogans and seem to get away with it, the right-wing press.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think we're serious and credible about what we want to deliver, actually, because we're on the ground with our constituents. We know how their lives have been made so much more difficult. And I talk that way about everybody, quite frankly. Unless you're living on gazillions of wealth, everybody's been impacted. You know, there were people who were sort of doing all right before, but then we had the impact of COVID. Then we had that Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng mini budget that just absolutely sent mortgages sky high, inflation impacted. Yes, there were parts of it linked to what's going on with the war, but absolutely you can't point just at that. And so no one is feeling better off. Do you know what I mean? And I was literally having a conversation just at the weekend, and a chap was saying to me, well, we used to have a bit spare for the kids, we'd do nice things, you know, save up, have a bit of a holiday. But I just can't manage that anymore because of the, you know, price has gone up, mortgage has gone up. And that is the difference where people, you know, have had enough, whether they've been struggling for a good while because, you know, they're on low incomes and they haven't seen their standard of living rise anyway. And now people who are sort of doing all right, but actually just struggling to make ends meet now. And that is the fundamental difference. I think people's head and their heart has gone. So whether there might have been one way or the other with our party, actually, their head is now telling their heart, actually, we can't afford, you know, 5 more years of Conservatives. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So change, hopefully, will be coming as soon as we can have that general election that might be announced in less than an hour. Or not.
Exciting time.
We'll look
Or
back
not,
at this
or not.
podcast and laugh, won't we?
I'll be back here in 4 months going, we still haven't got any news on the general elections yet.
No, exactly. That general election, yeah.
Yeah, I'm completely in agreement with what you just said there about that story. I mean, Starmer talked about in these first steps when he launched it last week about I think it's a young family who were trying to get themselves a mortgage. They'd got everything planned, and then of course Truss's fiscal event, or whatever you call it, came along and completely torpedoed it. The worst, though, he said they chose not to have a second child. You're like, ooh, that's a heck of a decision to have to make in your life, forced upon you by a government. And this is what I think is really important. When we talk about economics, we're literally talking about how, you know, the family can't afford a child, the family can't afford the holiday, you have to put down the luxury back on the shelf because you can't afford it, and your life is measurably worse in some way. Some people, of course, we know are really on the breadline and really, really struggling, but everyone's feeling it to some extent. So economic change has to be about refocusing on us, the people, again, not these, you know, it just seems a little bit abstract when you hear about numbers and inflation and, you know, but actually the effect on your pocket in your life, that's exactly what we focus on. And I totally agree with you on that.
Absolutely. And do you know what? This is why I think Rishi Sunak's completely weak when it comes to how he debates it, because he answers those day-to-day how people are feeling with technocrat, big figures, inflation, things that don't actually mean much to people because they're going, well, I'm not feeling it. You know,
do
I'm
you think
worse
he
off.
really doesn't understand
my
it,
gas
though?
bill, you know.
Do you think that's because he just is so removed because of his lifestyle, or because he just, I mean, there must be some people on the Conservative side who, to be fair, are as normal and down to earth as we are and just normal people, but there must be some people who just have no experience of life, and that must be a problem for them to really represent people, I'd imagine. Not saying they can't learn, and I can't have conversations and learn.
Part of it is people's experience. Yeah, I do think there's part of it is people's experiences of others' lives. I'm not going to comment on his lifestyle. I don't, you know, I hear reported that he's a very, very rich man. But actually, there are some people who are better at connecting and understanding ordinary people, and some of them are in all parties. Do you know what I mean? But that lived experience is really important. So I live in my hometown. I've lived there all my life, bar a couple of years here and there at uni and stuff. So I talk to my neighbours. I talk to people down the pub. I'm in my community as much, and I was doing that when I was earning a living before I came into Parliament. So I have those. They're normal conversations. I've had those conversations where people go, "Oh God, a bit skint this month."
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But whereas there are some people I think who've never actually had to go, "Oh God, I'm a bit skint this month," and I think that's that sort of difference. Do you know what I mean? And skint will mean different things to different people. And as I said before, there are some people who, for the first time, might be going, "Oh God, we can't have that, you know, bank holiday weekend break away because we just haven't got the money anymore. You know, we'll have to go down the park. You know, so being in touch with ordinary folks, and I think that's most of us. Do you know what I mean? Is so important, and not patronising them by sort of just, you know, saying, "Oh, but we gave you £300 in that thing." When it's so patronising to go, well, my gas bill went up by £800. So you're all right.
That's
because you're a millionaire.
Best way
Sorry.
to really put people off that, isn't it? Are
Yeah.
you not going to thank me for the things I've done? And that's
Too
the
many
other thing, of
times we sat
course.
there, and then we sit there and we take an sharp intake of breath. And this goes back to it's awful being in opposition. You sit there, sharp intake of breath, and then you just go, "You've been in for 10 years, 13 years, 14 years since I've got here," and it makes no difference.
Yeah,
But fingers
yeah.
crossed, this year, when finally there's a general election, we can see what we can do.
Yeah. Okay, so in that case, then, let's just move on to the election because, of course, the polls have been very strong for Labour for a long time. One of the reasons for establishing the podcast is that I'm concerned that they will narrow when the election is called, whenever that may be, and that suddenly we find ourselves not quite as ahead as we think we are. And this is why I think I've always said that our strength, I think, as a party is our membership. The Tories can outspend us, but they can't outpeople us because we have got more active members who are prepared to go out there and do the graft. So, so about that, what are your thoughts about the polls at the moment? And also, we've just had the local elections, haven't we? Is there any lessons, do you think, from the polls in the local elections that we should be reflecting upon as we come into this election period, whenever that may be?
Yeah. There's that phrase about polls, isn't it? They're like perfume, sweet to smell at the time, but you don't want to drink them in or something. Someone will say it better than me because things do change. And I've seen some of the stuff where in other countries where one party is riding high, and then literally in the last few weeks things changed.
Well,
drastically.
2017, you could say that about Theresa May, couldn't you? I mean, she crashed and then she did really badly, and suddenly Labour had a surge, didn't we?
Yeah, and whether you look at, I think it was over in Germany with the SPD as well, and also I'm sure I saw some research as well that and sort of connecting a bit with the local elections, that more and more, and I've had it a little bit on the doorstep, because people are undecided about how they're going to vote, they're making their decisions much closer to election day as well.
Right.
And that's why going back to our members who are brilliant. I'm a member and I will always be a member. I'm happy to have the privilege of being a member of Parliament at the moment, but I will always be a member of Labour Party because, we do it together. We are a movement. We're doing it for each other and the rest of the country. But fundamentally, we have to be out having conversations all year round to then know that how things are shifting. And that's what I've had, because I've been absolutely, out and about. And I've been out and about the Eastern region as the political lead in the Eastern region, supporting some of our battleground seat candidates.
Well, that's where I saw you in pictures with Jess Asato, and I've seen you with Matt Tremaine, I think, in Watford.
Literally, that's the breadth of the East. I've been up to Great Yarmouth with cousins as well, and then come right across Peterborough down to sort of Watford. So it's a big old patch, but we've got some brilliant candidates, and we're only going to get a Labour government if we get the good back. They say the path to Downing Street is through the Eastern region. Well, it is, because we need to get, and I can remember back in '97 we had something like 17 Labour MPs, at least might have even been over 20 actually, thinking about it, in the East, and we were diminished. And at one point we only had 2, and they were in Luton. And then we've come back, and we had, when I first got elected, it's quite a nice little story, isn't it? When I first got elected, there were 5 of us. Then there were 6 with the fantastic mid-beds by-election, and we're now at 7 through movements across the chamber, so to speak. But that shows that Labour really is working hard across all the country to get votes. We have to be careful about the polls. We have to be out just listening to people, door knocking, and that layered approach. Like, I know we have some members who say, I don't like going on the doorsteps, but I'll deliver my heart out for you. Absolutely, because you have that layered approach to campaigning. So if someone hears from you from a letter, then someone knocks on the door, and then you see something good on Facebook. It's that reminder, that layered approach about what we're about and how we're in touch with people. And that has so much impact. And we know there are digital wizards who do much more than I'd ever know about as a middle-aged woman. Thank you, the digital wizards. But it is. We've still got to keep up the effort. We've got to be out there, rain or shine. Sadly, I was a December 2019 election person.
I remember that day well, because of course I was a candidate as well. It was awful, wasn't it?
Might be nice.
Yeah, that day was wet and cold and obviously dark early, as you expect in December. But it was oh man, what a time to go to Parliament, eh? So the thing I was going to say about the sort of jobs as well in the party is that I sometimes feel like I promote a little bit too much the extrovert stuff that I like to do, and actually I'm by no means an organising person at all. I find that very hard to just do admin. I'm dyslexic as well, which doesn't help. So I find admin and organising things is not my thing. But somebody, on the other hand, might absolutely love that. And so when they're listening, they might think, I'm not necessarily somebody who might want to be on a doorstep and knock on the door and have a conversation with a stranger, but you might be somebody who's very happy to do the organising of leaflets, of street groups and road groups and all those things. Vital jobs, they really are.
Yep. And I've done them all because I've been an organiser in my time, a local organiser in our constituency and for our Labour group, because I was a councillor before I was an MP. And I actually can I know when I've been too extrovert for too long, I need a therapeutic leaflet bundling session, because I'm an extrovert. I love the people side of things, but there's nothing more satisfying than getting 15 boxes of A4 leaflets that you've got to bundle into your wards and your road groups, and then they're done and ready for volunteers to come and collect. And actually, we've got some fantastic volunteers in Luton who come, and the job that I really respect people doing is cutting the little bits of sticky, double-sided sticky tape to go in the corner of posters.
Yeah, in the corner of the posters. Yeah.
And there's all the jobs that are so important, including the people who spend hours fiddling with Contact Creator getting the data right. Whether it's board running, whether it's knocking on doors, whether it's bundling leaflets, stuffing envelopes, making the tea for the people who stuff the envelopes. Everything's part of the campaign, and that's why we need everyone to get involved, whatever they think they may or may not be able to do, because there will be something that everyone can do. Dialogue, sit in the comfort of your own home, talk to voters. Really important.
Exactly. You know what? During the Police and Crime Commissioner election here for Anna Smith, I got a box of leaflets I was organising for my CLP, and that smell of print suddenly got me into, it's election time. Just like used to. Print, I love that smell. Yeah. Alex Wood Hall in Cambridge. I walk in the door, I'm like, yeah, let's get fighting. Come on, let's do it.
Love it.
So in that case, then about that. So the local elections as well. I know it was really gutting we didn't get Harlow. Which I thought we were going to get that one, but then we did, of course, Peterborough and the Eastern region and stuff. Is there any lessons there from the local election, or do you think that they are completely separate to the national and they're not comparable?
No, you have to link both, because we as MPs, we stand on the shoulders of our local councillors, so it's a team effort. I think what we need to remember about Harlow, and I was out with Chris Vince quite a lot in Harlow, great guy. He is that overall in Harlow, we won the overall vote share. So with a little bit more,
he said, and there's also three up in each ward, wasn't it?
And this is it's only by a small percentage, but I'm really hoping to see Chris in Parliament next time round. Absolutely, and I'll be back out in Harlow. But I think it goes to show that it was literally sort of 35 votes and 55 votes in one or other seats. Where there happened to be a bit of a few more extra candidates, blah blah blah, and this is the sort of joy and sadness of elections, that sometimes it can come down to that has that knock-on effect of, if we'd have got a few more people out to campaign, a few more people out knocking on doors to push the vote out to get those 30 odd votes, it would have got one more councillor. If we'd have got the 50 odd votes, two more councillors got control of the council. And sometimes it can come down to that, and that's why we have to really rely on everyone pulling together and being targeted. You mentioned Harlow, absolutely was a target for us. We know that we've got areas where we've got target seats that we want to try and win, whether it's target wards. We need to be talking in those areas where we're gaining votes. They're the harder areas to have the conversation sometimes, because it's not where we know we've got Labour votes. We're going out to find the people who are switching over to us, who we might not have had conversations with before. But absolutely, that's what we need to be doing to try and make sure that we can get over the line in all these seats that, we need to win. You have to change minds in order to win.
Yeah. And you know what? I was in Peterborough at the weekend with Andrew Pakes, and he's on our battleground seat that I go to often. And it turns out I met a councillor who won his seat by 2 votes. So exactly the same the other way round, right? Is that is the difference. Like just those 2 extra votes you got out the door. And that means we win.
I'll give you my little anecdote is when I first got elected as a local councillor back in 2011, I was standing in the ward that I represented. It was a Lib Dem ward. We probably didn't think we were going to win it. We did our one leaflet, all good, and I was campaigning somewhere else to make sure we got other people elected, and I won by 16 votes.
Oh wow!
Because I was known in the community. It was a split vote, so there were some people who go, "Oh yeah, I know her. She lives around the corner from me. Oh, I went to school with her."
So I'll give her one vote.
That's why I know you have to sort of make sure you work hard, because stuff happens, and that's my favourite line. People always ask you for the bit of advice about stuff, and I just say the only thing I've ever learned is that stuff happens, as you say, one way or the other. Today, if 5 o'clock, stuff happens. Who knows? I'm going to go back to that. It won't have happened. It was not really boring.
We're building up way too much now, aren't we?
I know. We look back.
When the episode comes out, I'll be like, what are they even talking about? What happened? He announced something about,
exactly.
he did a big announcement about lanyards or sick notes, like it'll
exactly.
be about lint or something, just really nothing. Okay. Now, as we come to the end of the show today, this is the question that I'm asking all of our guests, and I think you're somebody's going to have a really cool answer for this. So I'm going to go for it now. Imagine you get the call. Let's say you get the big announcement for the PM at 5 p.m. today, and then after that, the producer at BBC 4, Radio 4, Desert Island Dish says, "Can you come onto the show and choose some songs? What one song would you definitely want to take with you on the island?" And I will add this to our playlist on Spotify for activists to listen to. So choose well.
Very good. Look, I think this question is always really difficult for people who love a bit of everything music. And so I love a bit of everything. There's no one major thing. So I started thinking about, firstly, who do I sing along to in the car? So it's always like an Oasis or a Foo Fighters. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, nice. Yeah, this generation of music's right up my street. I love this.
Yeah. So I'm going through the decade zone. Bear with.
Yeah. Okay.
But when I thought, what song, if I hear the beginnings, will always make me turn and go to the dance floor? And this is where I am showing my age, because it's Luther Vandross, Never Too Much.
Oh,
so for women of a certain age, we will always make a turn to go to the dance floor for a bit of Luther Vandross. And there you go.
Never too much, never too much. Yeah, okay.
Nice. Oh, here we go. You got me. Oh, I'm off.
So you'd be literally driving to work, turn the car around to go to the dance floor. I love that dedication to music.
No. I get the train to work, by the way, just in case. But that is if I'm out and about and there's something on, Luther will always get me dancing. But singing in the car, it's always your Oasis or your Foo Fighters. Good old rock out.
Yeah, I love that. Well, in that case, that will be joining the playlist. So that's Never Too Much by Luther Vandross, isn't it? Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So I'll be adding it on there then. Excellent.
Most of our young activists can go and ask their mums and dads, who's this?
Oh, you weren't alive at the time. You don't know how good it was. These kids today
exactly. Back in the day, etc. When we had proper discos.
You know what's really embarrassing? You just said about that song being quite old, and I was like, "Is it that old?" That's really bad, isn't it? I don't know why in my head I just think that things happened yesterday.
Well, it sort of is a disco kind of all get on the dance floor classics from the 80s, mid 80s.
Do you ever think though that? Okay, I was saying this to somebody at work today when a song came on and they said it's in the 90s. I didn't realise that long ago. Dance music doesn't really date, does it? Because it's got that lovely rhythm to it, which is like, geez, I sound like an old dad here, don't I?
The whole 90s is come back now, isn't it? It's trendy to be 90s. And some of us were like, well, we lived it. Thank God there weren't mobile phones around. And it is that dance music. So there's stuff now that I go, oh, is this something? Oh, it's new. But it sounds just like the 90s when we were out.
It's weird, isn't it? Because at the time I didn't think of the 90s as its own like era of music, but it's weird afterwards you hear back and you go, oh yeah, that is very much of the time, isn't it? Like indie, I don't know if that's coming back or not, because that seems a bit dated to me now, but I still love it. I like Radiohead's my favourite band.
Absolutely.
And,
exactly
Kula
that.
Shaker and all those groups. Anyway, right, so we're just reminiscing now. It's just it really has been before, hasn't it? Yeah, middle-aged people just chatting about the music they used to listen to back in the day when music was real music. If you're still listening, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I just want to say a massive thank you, Rachel Hopkins MP, for your time. It's been awesome talking today. And if you want to get involved in any sort of the campaigns, like tell us about which seats are battlegrounds, or not list them obviously, but I mean, what is the strategy with regards to like where they should go and campaign? What should they be looking for? What is a battleground?
Well, all areas are going to be either a battleground seat themselves or twinned to the battleground seat. That's one of the things. So you'll know through your local party who you might be twinned with to go and see, once or twice a month to help out with their campaigns. Always check on the website. The events tool is great for like signposting you to go to the right CLP, whether it's yours or not, whether it's a door knock session, a quiz, an online dialogue session. Everything's on there, and I always think that's a really good way of checking in, particularly if you're passing through. Summer holidays will be up. If you're going past someone else's neck of the woods and you fancy stopping off for a bit of door knocking, check out the app, the website, and there's always something going on, and it's only going to ramp up if an election's announced in 35 minutes.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, and let's hope that next time I see you, you're in part of a bigger Labour PLP, and you've also got a really kind of a stellar Labour government behind us who are really like on our side for once. That'd be fantastic.
Oh,
So
it's
thank
going to
you for
be
your time.
fantastic if we do it, but we've got to get elected first. So out on the doors, everyone. Let's get elected.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
Before I go, may I ask a massive favour? Like this podcast and smash that subscribe button. Leave a review. Share this podcast with other Labour Party members, your CLPA executive, and anyone who, like us, wants to fight for the next Labour government our country so desperately needs. If you're a candidate and wish to come onto the show, then email me at labourpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, bye for now.